Good to be with you. Sun is shining over here. Hope the weather's good by you all, but even if not, the Spirit of the Lord is with you, within you, and is for you. So amen. Today we're going to be talking about Samson. I was thinking of kind of subtitling it Sinner or Saint, or the realities and misconceptions of Samson. But let me ask, what comes to mind when you hear the name Samson? 1,000 dudes slain with a jawbone, right? Some will think of the woman who brought him down, Delilah, right? His super strength, his long hair, right? The locks. Some others, you might think of somebody else. You might think of a stereotype of the high school dumb jock, right? Big, strong, but not altogether that smart. Just thinking about pleasing the ladies. I think a little of all those things, but I also think some other things. I know I do think, what was he thinking with Delilah? Couldn't he see through that? It's the story of Samson. It's been a while since I had read it. Until the last couple of weeks, I've been reading and submerging myself in it, and it would rival anything that Shakespeare wrote. But it's real. And it's amazing. And Samson was empowered by God's Spirit, but he was also distracted by the flesh. So let's take a look at this. To understand Samson's time, we must understand the time of the judges. God had chosen Israel. He brought them out of slavery in Egypt, gave them his law to live by, placed them in the promised land. And they were expected to live like his people, to be holy, because he is holy. And they went into the land under the leadership of Joshua, another man of faith. But after Joshua dies, things take a downward spiral pretty fast. And that's what the book of Judges is about. And it's summed up in the very last verse in the book of Judges, which you'll find throughout the book. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. I do think that that's kind of similar to the time we live in today. The book of Judges is about a 300-year history of what happens when a nation depends on its own sense of morality rather than God's, and lacking the faith that they need to overcome. The book's a record of Israel's dark ages, if you will. After Joshua died, there was nobody to lead, no king, so everyone did what was right in their own eyes. It's a book filled with murder and rape and idolatry, homosexuality, betrayal, deceit, fornication, adultery, divorce, and that was just in the leaders of that time. God's people who had done what was right most of the time during Joshua's time now have walked away from God, and they started doing what was right in their own eyes. So God punishes his people for sin. In this we see the cycle of sin, servitude, supplication, salvation, and security. Israel would allow sin. They would follow after idols and reject God. So God would raise up people around them to oppress them and make them slaves, to put them to tribute. Then they would cry out to God, and he would raise up a judge or a deliverer to save them. And then there would be some time of peace after the judge died, but Israel would then just go back to sinning, and the cycle would repeat. So that's pretty much what happens in the book of Judges. A judge is usually a military and civil leader, not always, who would defeat the enemy and lead the people for a period of time. The setting we're talking about in the time of Samson is about 12th century BC. And Israel's been through this cycle time and time again already. And he's actually one of the latter judges in the line of judges. Let's pick it up at his birth, the prophecy. In Judges 13 we read, "And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines 40 years. And there was a certain man of Zorah, a family of Danites. Dan was the judge, right? That Dan means judge. That's interesting. Whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and bare not. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman and said unto her, Behold, you are barren and you bear not, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Sounds very similar to something else, right, that we see, right? I mean, it's an unusual birth because he has the honor of his birth being announced by the angel of the Lord, right? That's you see the announcement of Isaac, right? Isaac was prophesied, right? And John the Baptist, was prophesied, and he prophesied as well. And then we know Jesus also was prophesied. But that's all the only ones in the whole Bible that I could find by Samuel, right, that they were prophesied. So I thought that was something worth mentioning and talking about. So the angel continues to talk with Noah's wife, who she's not named. She's just Manoah's wife. And it says, Now therefore beware, I pray thee, and drink not wine, nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing. For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head. For the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb. And he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. Then the woman came and told her husband, saying, A man of God came unto me, and his countenance was like the countenance of an angel of God, very terrible. But I asked him not whence he was, neither he told me his name. Now, Samson's mission in life, not only was his birth extraordinary, but his calling was not to live a normal life. It was a special calling. And the Nazarite vow is mentioned here, and we'll read that in a little bit. And then, secondly, his mission to deliver Israel from the Philistines. I thought it was also pertinent in reading this that it says, He shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines. For we know he didn't accomplish that task. So I think that was very much a part of the prophecy. The Philistines were kind of, I think, conquered more under Saul and especially David, right? That's when you kind of see that their troubling of Israel has ceased. So we talk about the Nazarite vow. Let's take a look and read that into the record really quick. In number 6, Nazarite means to be separated, to be dedicated, or consecrated, if you will. And the Nazarite vow was taken normally for a voluntary period of time, and then it would end. So let's read that. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When either man or woman shall separate themselves unto a vow of a Nazarite, to separate themselves unto the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink, and shall drink no vinegar of wine, or vinegar of strong drink, neither shall he drink any liquor of grapes, nor eat moist grapes, or even raisins. All the days of his separation he shall eat nothing that is made of the vine tree, from the kernels even to the husks. From the skin to the vine, nothing. All the days of the vow of separation there shall no razor come upon his head, until the days be fulfilled in which he separates himself unto the Lord. He shall be holy, and shall let the locks of his hair on his head grow. All the days that he separates himself unto the Lord, he shall come at no dead body. He shall not make himself unclean for his father or his mother or his brother or for his sister when they die, because of the consecration of his God is upon his head. All the days of his separation he is holy unto the Lord. And I'll mention here and I'll mention later, you have a greater vow than this, because you are holy unto the Lord all the days of your life. And Samson also was holy all the days of his life. He was consecrated from birth to be a Nazarite. Verse 9, And if any man die very suddenly by him, and he has defiled the head of his consecration, then he shall shave his head in the day of his cleansing. On the 7th day he shall shave it. And on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, to the priest, to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering, and make an atonement for him, for that he sinned by the dead, and shall hallow his head that same day. And he shall consecrate unto the Lord the days of his separation, and shall bring a lamb of the first year for a trespass offering, but the days that were before shall be lost, because his separation was defiled. You got to start all over, right? Samson was to be a Nazirite for life, though, not a proclaimed number of days. Dedicated, consecrated to God for life. Not only to live a special life of dedication, but also to live a special life of delivering God's people from his enemies, right? So back into our story in Judges 13, pick it up in verse 7. But he said unto me, Behold, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and now drink no wine nor strong drink, neither eat any unclean thing, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death. Then Manoah entreated the Lord and said, O my Lord, let the man of God which you did send come again unto us, and teach us what we shall do unto the child that shall be born. And God hearkened unto the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again unto the woman as she sat in the field, but Manoah, her husband, was not with her. You can always know that God does hear you when you cry out, and he'll answer in his time. So the woman made haste and ran and showed her husband, and said unto him, Behold, the man has appeared unto me that came unto me the other day. And Manoah arose and went after his wife, and came to the man and said to him, Are you the man that is speaking to the woman? And he said, I am. And Manoah said, Now let your words come to pass. How shall we order the child, and how shall we do unto him? And the angel of the Lord said unto Manoah, Of all that I said to the woman, let her beware. Look, I've already told y'all, right? She may not eat of anything that comes off the vine, neither let her drink any wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. And all Israelites couldn't eat unclean things, right? So, all that I commanded her, let her observe. And Manoah said unto the angel of the Lord, I pray thee, let us detain thee until we shall have made a kid, or a baby goat, ready for you. And the angel of the Lord said unto Manoah, Though you can detain me, I will not eat of your bread. And if you will offer a burnt offering, you must offer it unto the Lord. For Manoah did not know at this time that he was talking to an angel of the Lord. Verse 17, And Manoah said unto the angel of the Lord, What is your name? And that when your sayings come to pass, that we may give you honor. And the angel of the Lord said unto him, Why do you seek after my name, seeing it is secret or wonderful? So Manoah took a kid with a meat offering, and offered it upon a rock to the Lord. And the angel did wondrously, and Manoah and his wife looked on. For it came to pass, when the flame went up from heaven from the altar, that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. And Manoah and his wife looked on it, and fell on their faces to the ground. Right? So this is the angel of the Lord. That's the angel, the messenger, who's speaking directly for the Lord. Right? He's carrying his power, his authority, almost like he's like an emissary, an ambassador for him. And they know that what they're being spoken unto is spoken from the Lord. They're hearing the word of the Lord. But the angel of the Lord did no more appear to Manoah and his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was an angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, We shall surely die, because we have seen God. Now they knew that they saw the angel of the Lord. But again, notice that close association. That emissary was just like being and seeing God. They knew who it was who was speaking to them through that angel. But his wife said unto him, If the Lord was pleased to kill us, he would have not received a burnt offering and meat offering in our hands, neither would he showed us all these things, nor would as at this time have told us such as these things. And the woman bare a son, and called his name Samson. And the child grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to move him at times in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. So his name is Samson, which means sunlight or sunshine. She probably sang, You are my sunshine. As Moses was drawn out of the water, Samson was to be a light to this people. And the Spirit of God, God's strength, was made perfect in his weakness. So, Samson rules for 20 years, and the text will tell us that later, but just up front. So this is just a small portion of his life that we read today. And there are many other deeds that were part of his life and part of his judging of Israel. Judges 14, verse 1, and Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I've seen a woman in Timnath of the daughter of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. Then his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that you go to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, Get her for me, for she pleases me well. You think he bears exactly what the book of Judges says about the people? He's doing what's right in his own eyes, is he not? He wants what he wants. He tells his father to arrange the marriage. They try to dissuade him. He has subordinated or subjected his spiritual interests to his flesh. That ever happened to you? According to God's standard, Israel was not to intermarry with foreigners. And this wasn't because God promoted racism in any way. But by marrying pagans, or those who did not know God, those people would turn the hearts of God's people away from him. And that's seen over and over again in the Bible, especially, as you know, in Solomon's life, right, where he built high places and altars under every green tree to, the multitude of the women in his life, all the foreign wives. And he turned his heart away from God. I was reading this, and it kind of sent a chill, when Samson says, just get her for me. She looks good to me. It's like, wow. Don't you remember your calling? To free Israel from the Philistines, and here you want to go a-courting to them. I just thought it was odd. But remember, the Spirit of God is working also in Samson. So the Spirit of God can also use your own carnal thoughts and desires for his own purposes. And I'll give you the example of the Pharaoh in Egypt. Right? Pharaoh hardened his heart. God gave him over to that. Right? So sometimes, in the end, to work his purpose. And sometimes God will do that in our lives too. Doesn't mean that he condones such behavior, but he will use it to accomplish his purpose and his will. So we see here that Samson did not apparently inquire of God of whom he should pursue. We should always go to God first and ask for wisdom. James 1 verse 5. Psalm 73:24. Samson not only didn't go to God, but he didn't take his parents' advice. He didn't honor them in the matter either. The Bible tells us that we should take advice of godly people when we make decisions. People who have shown the fruits of the Spirit and proven character. And you can read about God's plan for choosing a wife in his word, or a husband. The guidelines of what a good spouse makes. The Bible tells us beauty fades, and that's not what makes a good wife. Right? Somebody that loves the Lord. Not somebody who nags or argues. Somebody who's helpful to others in their time of need. None of those qualities did Samson look after. She looks good to me. That's what Samson said. But his father and his mother didn't know that it was of the Lord that he sought an occasion. Like I said, God sometimes will use these inclinations regardless for his purpose. Look, I ordained you from birth to free my people from the Philistines' oppression. If I got to use your carnality to do it and get you to have an occasion against them, I will. For at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel 40 years. And then went Samson down and his father and his mother to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath. And behold, a young lion roared against him. I thought it was interesting it was in the vineyards. I don't know if there's a really connection. But remember, he's abstained from all wine, right? And can't even touch grapes and dried grapes, right? He's supposed to stay away from all of that. And behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid. He ripped him apart. He had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father nor his mother what he had done. You know, that would gives you a thought to ponder too. Well, why wouldn't he? If you had just stopped a lion with your bare hands, who would you tell? Probably everybody, right? Probably everybody. Anybody who would listen, right? What a great feat. This is the first such event that we read of in the scriptures, and later we'll read of another, right? You know, King David also slew a lion, grabbed him by the beard and smote him, and then a bear as well. And that's the Philistine giant. There's also one other, Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, who also went down into a pit in the time of snow and slew a lion in 2 Samuel 23:20. For your notes, 1 Samuel 17:34 through 37 was with David, where he slew the lion and the bear. And then he had faith also through those actions that God would deliver him the Philistine. And I see that this is kind of a precursor to that, a foreshadowing. But the victory here was from the Lord. It was the Lord who had victory. It wasn't Samson. It was given to Samson. Samson had an air of modesty about this, actually, right? He didn't go off and tell anyone, right? But he was also wise not to reveal his God-given strength, because this is the first event we see. I mean, we don't know if there was others. We're not told that there was any others. The time wasn't right. Remember, I think about, Christ saying, hey, look, my time's not yet. Don't tell anybody about the miracle I just did, right? So, I guess in that, you could say Samson's a type of Christ in that. And so Samson went down and he talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. And after a time, he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. So he talked, she pleased him. He goes away for a long time, long enough for that lion that he just killed to start rotting all the way away, to the point where there's a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And I wondered, as I read, the word bees there is Deborah, a judge prior to him. I wonder if that was to make him think, hey, man, you're supposed to be judge in Israel, right? Philistines like a young lion. I don't know. Could be. I'm not going to make that dogma. But it's kind of what struck me in the spirit as I was reading it. And so Samson took thereof in his hands the honeycomb, and he went on eating, and came to his father and mother, and he gave it to them, and they did eat. But he told them not that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. So his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for used to the young men do. So why did he not tell the father and mother? Was it again because of, well, then I'd have to tell him about the lion? But maybe not. Maybe it was because he had taken that out of the unclean animal. So again, if that's true, he's deciding his flesh and his hunger over the commandments of God to stay ceremonially clean. Right? So we see Samson often struggling with the flesh. And I think that many of us can associate with that through the course of our lives. But that's not what you want to learn from Samson. So he goes down into the feast. And it came to pass when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle. He's the first riddler, right? If Batman was around then, Samson would be the riddler, right? I'll put forth a riddle unto you if you can riddle me this, Philistines. If you can certainly declare it to me within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I'll give you 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. But if you cannot declare it to me, then you will give me 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. And they said to him, go ahead, put forth your riddle, that we may hear it. And he said unto them, out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not, in 3 days, expound the riddle. Probably not a good idea to go out betting things you don't have. Again, maybe a little smug, a little confident. Maybe that confidence was in the Lord. So, again, I want to be fair to Samson in this. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they said unto Samson's wife, Entice your husband that he may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. You called us to take what we have. Is it not so? And Samson's wife wept for him and said, do you just hate me and love me not? You put forth a riddle to the children of my people, and you haven't told it to me. And he said, behold, I haven't told it to my father or my mother. I'm going to tell it to you. Because he didn't tell them about the lion, did he? Right? And she wept before him 7 days. Wow. Fellas, you ever have your woman weep in front of you, the effect it has on you? Imagine this, all 7 days. All 7 days while the feast lasted, and it came to pass on the 7th day, he told her, because she lay sore upon him. And she told the riddle to the children of her people. Again, look for the character before you decide to yoke up with somebody. Okay? And the men of the city said to him the 7th day before the sun went down, what's sweeter than honey, and what's stronger than a lion? And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would have not found out my riddle. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and slew 30 men of them, and of the Philistines, and took their spoil, and gave change of garments unto them, which expounded the riddle. And his anger was kindled, and he went up to his father's house. But Samson's wife was given to his companion, whom he had used as a friend, or his best man. Hey, you were gone killing Philistines. Here, I gave your wife away. I thought it was, again, interesting that he answers, when they answer his riddle, if you had not plowed with my heifer. First of all, guys, it's probably not a good idea to call your wife to be a heifer. Okay, that's probably one smart thing you could take from that. But two, a lot of people have mistaken and added into the interpretation of that meaning. They plowed with his heifer means that they put her to yoke. You have to yoke a heifer to take her out to tread the corn. They put her under yoke. They put her under bondage. How did they do that? Well, they threatened to kill her and her father with fire, to burn them out. You got examples of heifers. I mean, because I've read in some commentaries, the heifer didn't, I mean, they gave milk. It was the oxen that plowed. No, here, a couple examples for you. Hosea 10:11, where it talks about the heifer treading out the corn. So, what do you think about, hey, I bet the stuff I didn't have. I lost the bet, so I went out and killed 30 of your people and took their stuff and gave it to you. What do you think of that? Is that a kind of a godly action? Seems like, again, he's only thinking of himself there, right? He's just acting fleshly. But read what's in red. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. So again, God sometimes uses those carnal impulses to his advantage yet. And it was through the Spirit of the Lord that he was able to slay these people and deliver. Remember, God's whole ordination of him was to free them from the Philistines. That's God's enemies. So his anger's kindled. The best man, the keeper of his bride, another betrayal. We read it in Judges 15. It came to pass within a while after, in the time of the wheat harvest. So it's been a while now. I mean, that was in spring. Now we're in the wheat harvest. That Samson visited his wife with a kid. And he said, I will go into my wife to the chamber. But her father would not allow him to go in. And her father said, verily, I thought you had utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. And Samson said concerning them, now I shall be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure. And Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and took firebrands, turned tail to tail, and put a firebrand in the midst between two tails. So a firebrand's a torch of some kind, or a lamp, if you will. It's rendered like in Gideon with the lamps. And he ties them between the tails. No, he didn't just light the tails on fire, okay? I don't know if there was some kind of cord there that would have burned, and the foxes may not have been burned, but that's not the point of the story. There's 150 pairs of foxes. One, Samson works alone. He went out and caught 300 jackals. Wow. What an amazing, again, by the power of the Lord, not by his own might. They picture him in the movies, usually a strong guy, big muscle, Arnold Schwarzenegger type of guy, and that's not the case here. We don't read that. As a matter of fact, the fact that the Philistines keep saying, "Hey, what's the secret of his strength? What's the secret of his strength?" tells you that it wasn't an obvious thing. So he takes and catches 300 foxes, takes 150 firebrands, ties them between each pair of them, and then he lights them up. And he lets them go into the standing corn of the Philistines to burn up both the shocks and the standing corn, and the vineyards and the olives as well. So this is their wealth. This is their food. This is amazingly damaging. Then the Philistine said, "Who has done this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion." And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire, like they had threatened before. And Samson said unto them, "Though you have done this, I will yet be avenged of you. And after that, I'll cease. I'm going to get you back, but then I'll chill." All right? But again, out of his own sense of vengeance, rather than vengeance belongs to the Lord, we see how Samson's operating here. And he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter, and he went down and dwelt in the top of the rock Etam. Then the Philistines went up and pitched in Judah and spread themselves at Ai. And the men of Judah said, "Why are you come up against us?" And they answered, "To bind Samson we are come up, to do him as he's done to us." I just want to say, that's what sin does to you. It comes to bind you up. So be careful. Then 3,000 men of Judah went to the top of the rock Etam and said to Samson, "You know that the Philistines are rulers over us. Why have you done this to us?" And he said, "As they've done to me, so I've done to them. Eye for an eye. They did it to me. I'm doing it to them." Well, it's payback. It's vengeance. Vengeance is fine, saith the Lord. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, right? Oh, he did stand alone. I thought it was interesting that the men of Judah didn't want to help him whatsoever. They were just fine being in subjection to the Philistines. Look around the church. I see a lot of people that are just fine being in bondage. And that can't be. Samson operated alone, and though he was marred by weakness, he didn't hesitate to engage the enemy. He never led an army, didn't have a bunch of family with him like some of the other judges. Only the Lord was with him. Makes me think how Christ is coming. I've trodden the winepress alone. There was none with me. Right? So there's some valiant qualities about the Samson that we like to, talk about all his negative character traits. And I know that that's what I've heard a lot of over the course of my time being in the Word. But it's a complicated matter, just like it is with each of us. Right? So they said unto him, in verse 12, "We're come down to bind thee that we may deliver you to the hand of the Philistines." And Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you're not going to fall on me yourselves. Don't kill me yourselves." Right? And they spoke unto him, saying, "No, but we'll bind you fast and deliver you to their hand. Surely we won't kill you." And they bound him with 2 new cords, which are stronger, right? They're not dried out. 2 new cords are stronger, and brought him up from the rock. And when he came up to Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him. They're very much happy when they see their enemy bound before them, as Satan is when he sees that you're bound by sin. So the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the cords that were upon his arm became as flax that was burned with fire, like tissue paper, and they loosed off his hands. Right? And this is the part that you were talking about, right? He found a new jawbone of an ass, again, new jawbone, because, newer bone would be more solid, not brittle, and not dried out and old. He put forth his hand and took it and slew 1,000 men therewith. One man with one powerful God driving. And Samson said, with the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of an ass, I have slain 10,000 men. He's singing a song. Hey, I just killed all these guys with the jawbone of a donkey. Should have gave some glory to the Lord there, I think. And it came to pass when he made an end of speaking, he cast away the jawbone out of his hand, and he called the place Ramath Lehi. And he was sore athirst and called on the Lord and said, you've given this great deliverance to the hand of your servant. Now he's given him glory. And now shall I die for thirst and fall in the hands of the uncircumcised? So even through this, you see glimpses of his trusting of God, glimpses of his faith as he calls upon God for strength and for sustenance, right? So don't think everything bad about Samson all the time, right? So God, being the merciful God that he is to all of us, he clave a hollow place that was in the jaw, and there came water thereout. And when Samson had drunk, his spirit came again, and he revived. Therefore he called the name of the place Enhakorah, which is to say, a fountain of one calling. Fountain of one calling, which is in Lehi unto this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years, as we had previously said. Now, there's a full jawbone there. Often it's pictured of the half jawbone. I don't know which. It doesn't say. It just says the jawbone. Even that says the cheeky part. So, was it the bottom jaw? Was it the upper jaw? I don't know. Don't know. Doesn't matter. So, now that this was a fresh bone, should he have been, again, the unclean animal, freshly dead? Should he have been using that? I don't know. I don't know. Then went Samson to Gaza and saw there a harlot, and he went in unto her. What is he doing? Does this judge of Israel never learn? His eye for the foreign women was his downfall, right? As we see a repeated thing. His parents, remember, they were pleading, why can't you ever pick somebody from our own tribe? So he goes into a harlot. Now, it doesn't say anything, but obviously he went into a harlot for a reason, right? And it was told the Gazites, saying that Samson is come in thither. And they compassed him in and laid wait for him, so they surrounded him. And they laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all the night, saying, in the morning, when it's day, we shall kill him. And Samson lay till midnight, and arose at midnight, and took the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts, and went away with them, bar and all, the bar between the two doors. And he put them on his shoulders, and he carried them to the top of a hill that's before Hebron. Depending on where the commentators are right, I mean, that could have been, a 45-minute walk with these things, or it could have been, 10 or 12 miles. So either one's a great feat. But Samson didn't do it. God did it, right? Because God, the Spirit of the Lord, comes upon him and allows him to do these great things. And it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek. There he goes again. Whose name was Delilah, right? Delilah means delicate, weak, or languishing. The Hitchcock Bible name says it also could mean head of hair, which I don't know if he's just associating it with Samson's hair, but I thought that was an interesting tidbit. And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and said to her, entice him, and see wherein his great strength is lying, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him. And we'll give thee, every one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. Wow. And Delilah said to Samson, tell me, I pray thee, wherein your great strength is lying, and wherewith you may be bound to afflict you. So let me get this straight. You want me to tell you the secret of my strength so I can be bound and afflicted? Thick as a brick. And Samson said unto her, Well, if they bind me with 7 green withs, which is vines, little tendrils, vines, that were never dried, then I shall be weakened as another man. Then the lords of the Philistines brought her up 7 green withs which had not been dried, and she bound them with them. Did he let her bind them? Was he sleeping? It doesn't say. Right? Maybe he thought, hey, this is a fun game. Go ahead. Yeah, bind me with the 7 withs. See what happens. Now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. And she said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he brake the withs as the thread of tow is broken, again, just like burnt flax, when it touched the fire, so his strength was not known. Again, they didn't know the power, where his power and strength came from, thinking it was that. Now, something we were talking about last week on Sabbath after service was about, Delilah. Well, who was she? Was she a Philistine woman? Was she a Jewess? The scriptures really don't say. Now, Delilah could be a Hebrew name through its roots, but we're not told. But the fact that she says, Samson, the Philistines be upon thee, makes you wonder if she was not, maybe if she was she a proselyte to the Israelite, way of life? Not a very good one, obviously, if she was. But just another aside. So some of the translations for the 7 green withs will call them bowstrings, all right, because it's that type of, like a catgut, it's that type of vine that would be twine, to be used. So if your version says bowstrings, very, very possible. And Delilah said unto Samson, behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray thee, where you might be bound. And he said, if they bind me fast with new ropes that were never occupied, then I shall be weakened as another man. Now, we already know that's not true, because that's what the men of Judah did with him, right? When they bound him up. Delilah therefore took new ropes and bound him therewith, and said to him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And there were liars in wait in the chamber again, and he broke them from off his arms, just like a thread. And Delilah said unto Samson, hitherto you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me where you might be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks on my head with a web, or in a loom type of thing, and she does that, fastens it with a pin. The pin would be like a big nail. That same word is the word that Jael spikes through Sisera's temple and stakes him to the ground. So it's a large nail type object. Okay, fastens it with the pin and said to him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep and went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. And he's carrying this stuff on his head. And she said unto him, how can you say I love you when your heart's not with me? You've mocked me these 3 times and have not told me wherein your great strength is lying. And it came to pass when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him, so that his soul was vexed unto death, he told her all his heart, and said unto her, there has not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up at once, for he has showed me all his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and brought their money in their hand. This is sometimes how sin can get you, guys. Pressed daily, urging. And you could be vexed with it, but then you break. Let's not be unwise. Let us not be ignorant of the devices of the devil and how he works to wear you down. And let's be able to stand our ground in the Lord, right? Because the Lord has always been Samson's victory, and he's our victory as well. And it came to pass when she pressed him, I read that, didn't I? And she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as other times before and shake myself. And he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. But the Philistines took him, and they put out his eyes. Usually that was a red-hot poker in the eyes. And they brought him down, or they could have plucked him, I guess. Plucked or burned. And they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. Howbeit the hair of his head began to grow after he was shaven. Bind him, and cause him to grind. Sin does blind you. Sin can bind you. And it can grind you, too. You picture the grinding, you picture him pushing in a circle, grinding at the mill. Sin will have you going in circles. And just like the Philistines, sin will make sport of you. Ha, look at this great man or woman of God. Yeah, sure. So they put out his eyes, and he has no strength against them. And then they bring him out for sport now and then, and we'll read that. It says in verse 23, the lords of the Philistines gathered them together for to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon, their god. No such thing as a god named Dagon. It's a false god, just like many of the gods. They are all the idols of the people. And to rejoice, for they said, our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, under our hand. I don't think God's going to sit with that. And when the people saw him, they praised their God and said, our God has delivered into our hands our enemy and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. Again, 20 years, we don't know all of what he slew, only what we read. And there's only a few examples of what Samson did. And it came to pass when their hearts were merry, so they're drinking, partying it up, they said, call for Samson that he may make us sport. And they called for Samson out of the prison house, and he made them sport, and they set him between the pillars. And Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hand, allow me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house is standing, that I may lean upon them. Now they have dug up in some areas off from Tel Aviv. They've dug up some areas where they have some stone pillar bases, and the story is that they had great cedar beams that went up and would hold up the upper level of the house. So don't picture it Colosseum-like. Picture it being a little more full, as many auditoriums may be today. So he says, let me feel the pillars whereupon the house is standing, that I may lean upon them. So these are the main pillars that support the entire structure. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. On the roof, 3,000 men and women. Doesn't tell you how many are in the rest of the place. Was that it, or was there more? Sounds like the whole house was full of men and women. And Samson called unto the Lord. He used three versions of his name here. So he uses Yahweh, Adonai, and Elohim. I don't know if there's some significance to that, but I thought it was interesting. He says, Samson called on the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my two eyes. It's interesting that he calls out to the God of his covenant, and yet he says that I might be avenged for my eyes. Right? But again, even in that, is he not doing the will of the Lord? In that, one, he called upon him, and then two, he's going to destroy more of the Lord's enemies with this act. He has it in his heart to see these Philistines destroyed. Is that any different what God had called him to do? No, it wasn't different. And Samson took hold of the two middle pillars upon which the entire house stood, and upon which it was borne up, one with his right hand, the other with his left. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the Lord, and all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew in his death, which were more than he slew in his life. Now we know there was 3,000 on the rooftop. We know that he slew at least 1,030 from the couple of tales we read, but we don't know what he slew in the 20 years. I think this was even many, many more people. So he took out their food supplies, and now he kills a great portion of them, including most of the government. Right? It says all the lords of the Philistines were there. Can you imagine the devastation that had on the Philistines as a country? And his brethren and all the house of his father came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the burying place of Manoah his father. And he judged Israel 20 years. Well, let me die with the Philistines. Samson's willing to be used as an instrument of Israel's deliverance, even unto death. Now, some people might say, well, is that not like a suicide bomber type of guy? No. Well, this is somebody who's directly empowered by the true Spirit of God. So it's not. I think it was a final act of courage that was an expression of his faith. However jaded that might have been. So Samson, the mighty judge, is dead. His brothers and the other men of his family come. They dig through all the rubble. They find the broken and battered body of the man of God. They take him home and they give him honor, giving him a proper burial. And that was very important to people, especially in those days. But don't miss the point that God used Samson again. He used him to strike a terrible blow against the enemies of the Lord. Some things unique about Samson. He's mentioned in the Hall of Faith. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and of Samson and of Jephthah and David also and Samuel and of the prophets. That's quite a grouping. And we see that even in the Hall of Faith, there's people who had troubles, who struggled sometimes in the flesh. His service to the Lord was hampered by the sins that just marred up his life. But did you know that there's more references to God's Spirit falling on Samson than any other figure in the Bible? Even though Samson had many flaws, he's listed here in the Hall of Faith. And I'm thankful that Samson's story doesn't conclude with him just being bound and his eyes put out. Because I see the restoration of a fallen hero here. To me, the verses are reminding us that no matter how far we fall, if we trust in the Lord, He can save us and is willing to do so. That He has a plan to bring us back to Him. And I think that's encouraging to all of us. And sometimes we fail and fail in a big way. Here, Abraham lacked the faith to believe God's promises to take care of him, right? He went down to Egypt and then he lied about his wife, right? Sarah laughed at God. Yeah, right, sure, you're going to give me a baby, right? And mocked His promises. Isaac also lied about his wife. Moses committed murder. He struck the rock instead of speaking to it. Joshua failed to pray before he attacked Ai. And the nation of Israel was defeated. And Rahab was a prostitute. But she did a good deed for the men of faith, trusting in God, having her own faith. A successful Christian is not the person who never fails. So I want that to encourage you, each of you. But it's the person who, when they fall, when they fail, they get back up and they go on for the Lord. They return to the Lord and seek His face, knowing the only cleansing for them is from the Lord. The successful Christian is the one who accepts God's remedy for sin and reaches up to God for His cleansing and forgiveness when he fails. Proverbs 24:16, for a just man is falling 7 times, but is rising up again. The period of the judges was the dark age of Hebrew history. The entire nation was characterized by the spirit of rebellion. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. I think Samson's weaknesses mirrored that of the people, the religious and moral climate of the people as a whole. As I said, the episodes that we read of Samson aren't the totality of his service to the Lord. 20 years, and we got a few chapters. But we can see in those few chapters, Samson's sins were the weaknesses of the flesh. They weren't totally defiant unto the Lord like when Israel would go into utter idolatry, right? But you know what? God heard him in the end, didn't he? So you could look at him and say, well, what kind of judge was this? What a failed guy. What's he doing in the hall of faith? Now, I'm not advocating any of the things that he is shown that he's done wrong. But you know what? He did what was right as well. He fought the battle for the Lord. He trusted in the strength of the Lord. And when he was down, he called out to God for help. I think that's testimony that Samson was sincere in his devotion, although he might have been tragically weak in his character. And in a spiritual sense, I think we must all be Nazarites, consecrated and separated for God's purpose. The Nazarite vow is compared to what would be our baptism vow, signifying our commitment to God. The Apostle Paul clearly writes in 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20, "What? Know you not that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit which is in you, which you have of God, and you are not your own? For you are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." And 2 Corinthians 6:17, "Wherefore come out from amongst them and be thee separate." Remember I told you that's what Nazarite it means, to be separate. And we're told the same thing. "Come out from among them and be you separate, said the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you." It's a greater vow than Samson's. It's a lifelong vow. Actually, it's an eternal vow. God expects us to live a holy life. This means a life that is holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, dedicated to God's way of life. That's how you get an H-O-L-Y life. Romans 12:1 and 2. Very important that you always consider this. As Paul writes to the Romans, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be you transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." When are we, or let me direct it to you, when are you going to decide to give 100% of all your being, mind, heart, and strength to God, as we are admonished to in Romans? What are the things that easily ensnare us and prevent us from surrendering our lives to Him? I think we can learn these things as they happened unto Samson. What are the things holding us back? Are we His people? Yes, we're His people. Are we His people just during Sabbath services and holy days? I trow not. We're not just Christians when we're surrounded by our church brethren. We're not just Christians when things are going according to plan, when things are good and convenient for us. That's not Christianity, that's humanity. Hey, when everything's good, it's all good. If we say that we're Christ and that we believe, really believe in what it means to be baptized into his death, to share his sufferings, and yet our actions show the opposite of that, we're not fooling anyone but ourselves. Christianity, true Christianity, is not merely a feel-good part-time duty. It demands all of your being. It demands holiness. You vowed unto God. Surrender your vows unto him. The life of a Christian is a life of overcoming, not a life of conforming to this world and the patterns of this world. It takes an active, zealous, and faithful Christian to go against the influence of this world and to endure to the end, to be in God's kingdom. Be strong, fight the good fight, endure to the end. I can learn that from Samson, the story of Samson. So what up, people of God? Are you ready? Are you ready to be holy unto God as you vowed in all things? You know, on the surface, it's difficult sometimes to see why Samson was counted among the heroes of faith. But as we've seen, it was his faith that made him strong. And it was his faith that overcame the consequences of his sins. We have to learn these lessons from the life of Samson. Another lesson we learn from the life of Samson is this. Sin does carry a high price and does carry consequences. When we engage in sin, we must be prepared to pay the consequences. Are you prepared to pay? There will be consequences in our lives, in our families, in our churches, in our communities, in the eyes of the world. Just because God forgives you a sin, that doesn't mean the consequences will disappear. Remember David, when he went into Bathsheba and conceived. The child had to die. That was the consequence of his sin, but David was forgiven. Psalm 51. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness. According to the multitude of your tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. How do you think David felt after knowing what he did to Uriah the Hittite? What he did to Bathsheba? And what happened to their child because of all of that and because of his sin? Enough to destroy anybody, right? But what did David do? He mourned. But then, in faith, he knew he was forgiven. He knew, I think, all the time of his mourning that he was forgiven, but that he had to bear that consequence of the sin, and that God would hold him up and strengthen him throughout it. It's another lesson that we can get from Samson is sin doesn't have to rule in your life. It doesn't have to. If we fall into sin, then sin can easily start to make you not seek God in prayer. The only answer, the only cure, and you don't go to it because of shame or guilt. We can learn from Samson. God is faithful even when we aren't. Seeking the Lord is the only avenue any of us have for restoration. Don't allow guilt over your actions or depression or discouragement keep you away from Him. There's a pride in that, selfishness. You have to believe what He says. He is the only hope of restoration we have. Yeah, you might find it hard to believe, but there is a God in heaven who loves you in spite of your sins. He doesn't love your sins. And you may have to pay some consequences from them. But if you trust him and lean upon him, he will cleanse you, forgive you, restore you. But you have to come to him. And I think many of us walk in the shadows because we don't come to him. Come to him and be cleansed. Stop walking in the shadows. Renew your vow. Walk in holiness. Where are you in your walk with him? Do you believe the salvation you have through your faith in him? Are you as close as you should be? We sang, in the garden, how he walks with me and talks with me. Is that true of you? Are you as close as you used to be? Maybe you've backslid. Are you facing a time of testing through temptation? Remember, God says, I'll never leave you or forsake you. He is with you all the time. Another main truth to hold dear is that God is full of mercy. He rescues those who don't deserve it, right? Did me. Did all of you. Samson didn't deserve it. God rescued him. Honored his faith. Because we have to trust what God wants. We have to try and see things through his eyes instead of our own eyes. Instead of doing what's right in our own eyes, we have to do what's right in the eyes of God. One of the benefits of doing what's right in the eyes of God is that he'll grant us greater spiritual vision from that deeper knowledge and relationship with him. Consider the words of Christ in John 14:21, where he said, "He that has my commandments and is keeping them, he it is that is loving me. And he that is loving me shall be loved of my Father. And I will love him, and I will manifest myself to him." God rewards those who obey him with a greater experience of himself, a greater knowledge of the truth, and a true sense of freedom that is only ours in Jesus Christ. For your notes, John 8:31 and 32. The truth shall set you free. The story of Samson is a vivid reminder not just to hear God's word, but to obey it. Let it be our prayer to understand God's word, to apply it in our lives, being characterized in our lives by doing what is right in God's eyes. That's all I have for you today. God bless and have a great rest of the Sabbath. Ronnie will be back up in a second.